Matthew Paul Lissy. How the hell are you, man?
Johnny, what's up? How are you? I'm doing good.
I'm doing well as well, my friend. It's what was it? Tuesday night now? Jeez, the
Tuesday,
all
yeah. And I
yeah.
hate to be that guy, but I keep forgetting what day it is.
Well, it's funny because the majority of Suns fans right now like forget what day it is. I had so many people yesterday be like, "Dude, Suns are gonna win tomorrow. They're gonna win." I'm like, I guarantee you one thing: they will not win tomorrow. And this is like three or four people I had this conversation with. I'm like, I guarantee you they won't win tomorrow. Like, what do you mean, man? Like, you have faith in this team. The Suns got this. Suns in
Yeah,
five now. Suns in five. I'm like, I know.
yeah,
They're not going to win tomorrow. And guess,
yeah,
and people are like, what do you mean? And again, this is Monday. We're having this conversation. I'm like, because they don't play until Wednesday, bruh. They're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, this NBA Finals has been kind of a weird scheduling conundrum considering how the rest of this playoffs went, where the games were every other night, and it was just like there was this natural rhythm. It's like, okay, there's a game, there's a day to kind of talk about it, and then boom, you were right back in another game. And now we're at this point where it's a game. There's an absorbing day, there's a rebuilding of confidence day, and then there's another day. So I know on the last podcast you mentioned you like this extra break, right?
You know what? For the players, I do. For excuses, for players to actually heal up, even if it is Giannis, it's nice for them. For me, it's like you have to find other things to do. Of course, they did have baseball the last two nights, so I don't know if you got to enjoy that, but it's been tough with no Suns because it seems like a week in between, even though it is the 2 days. And I feel like anytime we don't do a podcast within a day, it seems like a week, because we've done every game this year, and every game is basically separated during the season by 1 day. So it just seems like it drags on, man. And especially when it's the finals, like you're sick of hearing everything. You have no idea really why Booker and Ayton, didn't really play the fourth quarter. Of course, it was a big lead, but you're trying to forget about those things, and then just turn on the telly when you come home tomorrow and just begin watching the first quarter to see tip off. It takes a long time, and it's makes me very anxious.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, this is episode 210, and we started this season, gosh, like just right around 100. So I mean, we put together a lot of episodes this year, considering the fact that we go live after every game on YouTube, and then we release the audio on the Bright Side of the Sun podcast network. And we're doing all-star game stuff, and we're doing draft stuff, and we're doing all these different things. So you're right. We're always having basketball conversations. So when there's like this gap since the last time we've had a basketball conversation, it creates and generates a sense of anxiety in myself as well, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's got to be something new to talk about. And there's a bunch of little new things to talk about, like Kawhi had surgery on a torn ACL, like no shit, and there's all those little kind of things. But again, we're in the middle of the NBA Finals, and this is the natural flow of things. This is how the finals always are, and the playoffs generally always are. They're a prolonged process that goes on for 2.5 months, and we're at the back end of it, and we're engaged because it's our team that's finally in there. And I can only imagine what the players are going through, and how they have to deal with all of that media pressure. After every practice, they have a media session. And in those media sessions, they're getting asked a lot of the same questions. And although I didn't enjoy very much baseball over these past couple days, the one thing I did enjoy was the fact that in some of the media sessions, like, did you see Monty Williams answering questions about his comments after game three?
I was actually driving on my lunch, so I got to listen to probably about 5 minutes of the interview, but not the whole thing. Why? What did he say?
It was interesting how somebody asked him, it's like, well, you said you weren't going to talk about the referees, and then you talked about the referees. And Monty was just like, okay, is this like a setup or something? Like
Oh, that's
there,
the part I did hear.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
where it's like you can tell he is becoming irritable. A lot of, and this was the same thing on the Bucks side after game two. It's like they're a little bit more irritable with some of the questions because they're hearing them all the time. And I love Monty's response. He's like, Well, I stated the fact that one of their players, Giannis, had 17 free throws and that our team had 16. He goes, that wasn't complaining. That was a fact. And he kind of left it at that. And I was just like, you can see that that's the added pressure that all parties involved, all players, all coaches, are all dealing with. It's they're already over analyzing the game just as we are as fans, but they have to obviously execute those adjustments that they see. But they're also getting asked about it constantly and consistently, and it's again, that's why when you win an NBA championship, I don't care what your road was to get there, it is hard. It's hard to win in the NBA, period, and then you add all this external pressure on this team and these two organizations, and yeah, you win the chip, you earned it.
Yeah, I mean mentally too, especially when you have your three stars on the team that really just could not produce last game. I mean, the stats were okay for Chris Paul. Ayton had a solid game, but of course didn't even get 30 minutes. But it's just things like that for those guys to sit here or sit there in Milwaukee to just think about that. But then they're not. They're focused on the next game. As soon as they go into the locker room after the sound of the final horn last game, I'm sure they were just locked in. And that's what you always hear with this team. It's like after a loss, and it's usually game three, how are they going to come back? And how are they actually going to make the adjustments? And you always hear that they're in that locker room and the mood isn't ever really down. It's always guys picking each other up. As soon as they get back to the hotel or whatever, they're ready to go. They're ready to watch film. Certainly Chris Paul, right? That's his thing. Like he was probably watching film on his phone on the way back to the locker room. But he honestly, the last game was just like a blur, and Chris Paul even talked about it too. And when you go into that game with that crowd, and then there's the dunks by Giannis. I mean, Cam Johnson's the best dunk of the night. There's the dunks, there's the 3-pointers going down. It's hard to overcome that, and I think it just really hit the Suns in the face, and it was really hard to come back. And I think that's the reason Monty didn't play those guys in the fourth. He just knew it wasn't there, and for him to keep answering questions like a Super Bowl weekend, like every
Yeah.
day with the media, it's hard on them, man. And like you said, it doesn't matter the road to get there because it's impossible mentally for a lot of people on earth to go through the situation and they go out to perform like they do every game and they always come back, right? And that's the one thing you can trust in this team that they're going to come back. They'll have a game plan. They'll adjust. And whether or not the Milwaukee Bucks can hang with the adjustments, it's up to Milwaukee, really, because I know the Suns will come through and make the changes that they need to make.
Yeah, and it's just a matter if they can execute those changes consistently enough in an effort to provide a victory for the team. Because you can have the adjustments all day long, but if you don't execute them, for example, if they find a space on the floor where they can get Devin Booker good looks and he's just not knocking down the shots, well, guess what? You don't win those games. But I was thinking about it, and you heard this term a lot this postseason, considering the fact that the Suns won all four of their game ones. It seems like every time the Suns won a game one, the opposition would say, well, that was a feel out game. That was a feel out game for LeBron and AD. That was a feel out game for the Clippers and the Nuggets. That was a feel out game for Giannis and Milwaukee. And I kind of feel like that's almost been the same kind of approach, if you will, if that is truly the case. I don't think there's really anything. Do you think that there's a feel out game mentality from anybody, or do you just think the games kind of come out the way they are?
Well, for in this series, I think you had that for Giannis because of his injury, right? You even saw in
True.
game one, he didn't look the same. Game two, he looked just dominant, like Giannis. And last game, same exact performance. So I think that's the feel out for Giannis and the rest of the team because, like we talked about before, they finished the last series 5-6 to beat the Hawks without Giannis. Then you have the adjustment to come back in because the thing is like teams will always do this, any sport. It's like, wow, they're playing this great, but their star's not there yet. Just wait till they come back. And there's always that adjustment. There's always just something that throws that team off. We had it with Chris Paul when he came back. The Lakers series, he was kind of hurt, but even when he came back, like it was tough to adjust in certain situations. I know they finished that series in 6, but you can just see like it just takes a while for these guys to get back into it. And you saw it against the Clippers too when he missed the first 2 games and he came back. The adjustments there were very hard to get the group back together once he did come back to the starting lineup.
Yeah, and it wasn't until Game 6 where he was kind of back in his full on point guard mode. But the point I was making there was game three has kind of been the feel out game, if you will, for the Suns, where they go on the road, they see what it's like on the road, they see what the opposing crowd is, they see how the opposition gets amped up and what their go-tos are when the crowd is behind them. And then they make those appropriate adjustments in game fours. And we've seen that consistently, whereas leading up to this point, they are 3-0 in game fours. So it's going to be really interesting to see as we head into game four tomorrow how the Suns truly respond. And I was having this conversation with somebody today. If DeAndre Ayton comes out and has a ball game, and I'm not talking about a box score game, I'm talking about a ball game where he's affecting Giannis's shots with shot deterrence, where he is rebounding the ball, where he's sprinting up and down the court, where he's doing the things that make DeAndre Ayton an effective player. And he comes out and he has a solid game tomorrow, and the Suns win, and they go up 3-1. I really think that you can start to make a case for DeAndre Ayton for the MVP of this series, because you think about it, you saw how valuable he was in game three when he wasn't present on the court in that third quarter and going into that fourth quarter. When he was no longer there, the Milwaukee Bucks really had free reign at the rim. Giannis could really do what he wanted to do. And I think that, again, we're obviously getting ahead of ourselves, but I think that if DeAndre can come out and have one of the solid ball games, not box score games, but ball games, I really think it can, he is one of the vital cogs in this team that needs to perform well in an effort for them to be successful.
Yeah, you're correct. And we talked about this before the playoffs even started with DeAndre Ayton. We were talking about X factors. So what's the X factor for the Suns getting to the playoffs, making a run? It was DeAndre's play, because we
Yep.
saw it in mid-season how good he was. We're like, we're not going to make any trades. We added Torrey Craig, but it's absolutely depends on him. And it sucks because he is younger. He's a younger out of the three stars. You would want to be more on Booker and Chris Paul, but I trust him the most. And it's definitely very strange. I trust him the most out of the three, Booker, then Chris Paul. I mean, but then to say that they're so neck to neck to where they just take over like one quarter, you'll have one of them do whatever they want. And they're like, okay, like I like this. Like, Chris Paul gets hot. So then you trust them then. But DeAndre Ayton, all game long, except for when he came back in the fourth quarter and he was just fumbling the ball because he was out a whole quarter. Like, you can't count on him to come back in and finish off the game. It's not like, Kobe Bryant or some kind of slick shooter like Steph Curry to come back in and hit some threes to get your team back in it. DA needs that rhythm, and he was getting that in that game in the first quarter. If he comes out and he puts up even like 20-15, and that's going to be an amazing game by him, yeah, he's MVP candidate leader. Even if Book goes off for like 25 points, Chris Paul has a solid close to triple-double or something like that, DA is still the X factor in this series, and he's the guy. He's the most valuable player. We need him to win. He's going up against the two-time MVP. If he defeats him, he will win the MVP. And that is just crazy to say, right?
I know. Isn't it absolutely crazy? And you're right. Before the playoffs started, that was the conversation. It was like, listen, we will go as far as DA will carry us. Because given the size of the Lakers and Nikola Jokic and Ivica Zubac and how they can play 5 out when Zubac wasn't on the court against the Clippers, and now Giannis, like, that's a murderer's row of talent that DA's had to face. And he's performed, for the most part, this entire postseason. And that's obviously going to be, I think, where a lot of our eyes are going to be at tomorrow when they tip off against the Milwaukee Bucks, is how is DA responding? How engaged is he early on? Is the hustle there? Is Giannis doing kind of the bulldozer thing? And what are the Suns doing to negate the bulldozing Giannis? And I truly believe that we'll just see a lot of Jay Crowder on Giannis early with DeAndre Ayton taking Lopez, and you're going to see a lot of that. You'll see some switch defenses, and you'll see some collapsing by DA at points. But I really think that that'll be Monty's strategy in an effort to avoid any foul trouble, is to keep him a little bit closer to Brook Lopez so he can still have that shot deterrence, but he's not going to be the target. And Milwaukee will probably try to create switches and get him on one-on-one, and I'm comfortable with DA on one-on-one. It's like you were saying in the podcast right after the game. It's like those were some ticky-tacky bullshit fouls on DA. There was one that was like valid, but the other two, it's like if you go back and watch them, it's like I get it. There was a little bit of contact, and those calls are going to occur sometimes in the NBA, but it's just unfortunate that they had to occur in the NBA Finals in those situations.
Yeah, especially when he is just so dominant when he's on the floor. It's crazy how the refs can just take one guy out of the game, and it's like, okay, well, defend for yourself, Suns. Figure something else out because we took your guy out because he has 4 fouls now. And then, oh, fifth foul, there it is. Even though the fifth foul was kind of a foul, he put his body into him, and it was a foul. But then by that
Yeah.
time, Ayton, I think, was frustrated with the foul calls.
So we got a question in the chat from Narish. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate that. He says, "What are the possibilities of attacking the paint and getting Giannis in foul trouble?" And Matthew, I'll let you give your 2 cents on that, but I'll give mine real quick. I think one of the things that Milwaukee does a good job of is when they're on defense, you have Giannis on Jay Crowder. So Jay Crowder is not an interior player; he's a perimeter player. So he doesn't really spend a lot of time in the paint defensively until our guards slash into the middle. Then he'll do some of that collapsing, and that's where he gets a lot of those block shots. So I think what the opportunity is to try to generate some switches. And I mean, if you can get DA and Giannis, and he proves that he can be physical enough with Giannis to try to draw some fouls, that'd be fantastic. Because it would be nice to see a flipped script from Monty Williams and the Suns where they're attacking Giannis to the point where they're jumping into his body and they're drawing some of those fouls and they're making him think double. He has to think about, he has to make some business decisions, if you will, and maybe he can't be as aggressive defensively. So, what do you think about Narish's question right there, Matthew?
It's actually a good question because I was thinking that, Aiton, I was thinking about this today, like things that he needs to improve on going to the next season. I know that's so stupid. I would get hated on by saying something like that, but I'm thinking about that. I'm like, just the one thing he doesn't know how to do really is draw the foul, right? He has moves. I'm sure he's worked on them, but using them in the game, they're just not as solid. Of course, they're not Giannis like they're not even close to that. So for him to actually draw fouls against Giannis, it's very difficult because I don't think he
Hmm.
knows what to do to get that contact. The only guy that really comes to mind that can maybe get him a couple fouls, and weird to say, like Cameron Johnson, if he comes in the game and he's aggressive again, and Giannis is in that paint, I mean, I could see just Cameron Johnson going at it. But the only thing is, Aiton and Cameron Johnson, they don't get the calls. They just don't get the calls,
Yeah.
and especially against Giannis. So that's the one thing that sucks. It's like one more full season of those two, like really
Oh,
learning
without a doubt.
on the foul, then yeah, that's something that we can do is focus on getting Giannis in foul trouble because he had some ticky tack fouls a little bit towards the end, but it didn't really matter by then. But if we
Yeah.
have those two that know how to draw him, then yeah, we can talk about it. But right now, it's just that's not the Suns' game.
Dude, I'm telling you, I'm getting you like a Cameron Johnson jersey. You love this guy so much. You are the president and
Great story, right?
CEO of the Cameron Johnson fan club, man.
Yeah, man, I love that dude.
But you're right, and I think that if we want to get Giannis in foul trouble, and it's got to be like via Chris Paul. And Chris Paul's tried it this series, and he hasn't gotten the calls. Like that one call in Game 2 where it was a foul on Chris Paul, where Giannis just mowed him over. Like that's a foul every time on the big guy because Chris Paul had position. He positioned him up, and he's tried that a couple times, and he's paid for it physically. And that might be one of the reasons why he's a little bit more tentative to do it. But you really have to kind of get crafty in the way that you get a couple of those fouls on him in transition. You stop in front of him and he runs you over, things like
Yeah,
that. Like, you have to do those crafty things because that's what he's doing to you is he's being crafty with his physicality around the rim and he's running into your players quite literally in the Jay Crowder situation underneath the rim where he's just linebacking through people. And then he was talking today in his press conference how he's like, well, no, I've been fouled. Look at some of my scrapes. It's like, don't get me wrong. Like Giannis has been fouled and he has earned his trips to the line, but not every one of them. And I think it's one of those things where the Suns should really focus on trying to take him out of his rhythm. I think Jay Crowder's a good guy to do that on defense, where it's just physical. And then hopefully Torrey Craig is somebody who's feeling a little bit better now. The injury that happened in Game 2 is now 6 days ago. Going into tomorrow, it'll be 6 days since that injury. So he's really had an opportunity to kind of rest up and hopefully has the ability to play more physical and just fluster Giannis. And I think that's really, it's such a tough ask. I was actually watching an HBO documentary yesterday, and I finished it today on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And they talked about, his whole life and career, and they actually had the video of Jerry Colangelo on the phone when he called tails and it was heads, or vice versa, it was heads and he called tails. So the Bucks ended up with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and we got Neil Walk. And watching somebody like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you saw how unbelievably dominant he was. And I was thinking about, what was it like back then when you were going up against him? Like, how did you game plan against that? And part of me kind of feels like that with Giannis right now. Like, he's clearly playing at a peak level on the biggest stage, and he's embracing it. And he's a guy who you want to root for if he wasn't on your team, because he has that fire and that passion. But the Suns are tasked with trying to guard him and slow him down. And I think the thing that killed us in this last game is the fact that the guys around him were the ones who killed us. Because you know what? Giannis had 42 points in game two, and they lost by 10 points. So it's definitely plausible for this Phoenix Suns team to go back to really ensure that they're squaring up Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton and taking them off of their spots in an effort to negate their offensive production. And if Giannis goes for 40 again, he goes for 40 again. But, let it come in a down 3-1 in a series.
Yeah, and he honestly this season was just a man forgotten. A lot of people just kind of put him on the back burner. It proved to me that you can get to the championship. He has, and then when you're a Suns fan and you're like, come on, we got to get a stop. Like last game, we got to get a stop, get back in. It's got up to 4 points, cut that lead to 4 points.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like when you're looking at Giannis down there and you're getting up second chances to him around the rim, which is impossible. I mean, I can't get mad at those guys. That guy is basically just unstoppable to get those offensive boards and put it right back in. And he is just an amazing player, and I'm not like loving on him, but I mean, we've always loved this guy. I mean, he is great. I don't want him to ever be forgotten, and I want him to win a championship, not this year, of course.
Not
but
this year, exactly. Not this year,
at all.
bud.
And I think the Suns have the tools, man, to slow him down. That's just Deandre Ayton. So just focus on him, and he's done this, right? Ayton has come back game after game after foul trouble games, and he'll come back and just put up like one or two fouls. He figures out how to do it, and that's a lot of pressure on him to stay out of foul trouble while trying to provide good defense and offense.
Yeah, and that's what Monty Williams was saying today. Is like they just got to figure it out. And DeAndre Ayton, due to his athleticism, his lateral quickness, his ball control, his body control, he really is good at avoiding those fouls. So I'm really looking, as that obviously as a key tomorrow. I'm looking at the role players tomorrow. Again, on the road is where the role players for one team can shine and the opposition typically don't do as well. Because when you have the likes of Jay Crowder or Cameron Payne hitting a three on the road versus at home, it's a different energy. And they thrive off of that energy. So I'm looking at Cameron Payne, Cameron Johnson, Jay Crowder, Mikal Bridges. And if those guys can come together and put together like 50 points, then you really have a good shot at beating this team. And that's what it's going to take. Again, you look at the last two games, they shot 50% from the field in game two. From three. And then they shot like 28% the next game. And it's like you bump that number up to like 30%, 35%, and all of a sudden we have ourselves a little bit of a ball game. And I just really was interested in some of Monty's adjustments in that game, how he didn't bring DeAndre Ayton back when the Suns knocked it down to 4 points, when it's 74-70 right there. When they called that timeout, I would have brought DA right back. Because you knew what they were going to do. And I think there were some really good learning moments for Monty Williams, and he had the flexibility to have those learning moments. He was up 2-0 in a lead, or in the NBA Finals, and he had a lead. So you can allow him a little bit of leeway to try some different things out, and I think he learned from that. Are there any other things that you think that he learned that he's going to impart upon the Bucks in this game, in Game 4?
Yeah, play your starters in the fourth. I want to see that happen. Because honestly,
nice.
I just think I still think it's weird. I know they played like crap, and I keep bringing it back up, but it just bothered me. Like, I was like, what is going on? It's just so weird, and I hopefully it doesn't kick him in the butt or this team in the butt this next game where it's like, well, I mean, the fourth quarter, we didn't even try to come back. Because like I always say, 5 to 6 minutes left in the game, anything can happen. Whatever lead you
Amen.
have
It's the
around
NBA.
22 points, anything can happen. And in the finals, it's like to waste a quarter. Well, I still don't know why. So yeah, just play your starters. And I'm looking at the starters. Of course, Chris Paul, because I thought Cameron Johnson had a good game. Of course, Jay did too. And these guys off the bench did a pretty solid job. Payne was just 3 for 10, but you can't really expect too much from them. So the starters just need to really get it together, man, and put up those stats they put up against like the Nuggets, get through this Milwaukee team, which is a lot to
Uh,
ask.
I hear you. Well, we're going to bring someone on to the show real quick. Uh, Nikki Tan. Nicholas Tan, how are you doing? Are one of
Hey,
our oldest listeners from once upon a time when we were the Solar Report podcast. How you doing today? You can unmute to talk.
Oh, right. Sorry. My bad.
No, you're good. How you doing, man?
oh, good.
Good. Having lunch. I'm having my lunch.
I'm having
What
lunch
time?
too.
What time is it in Malaysia?
Second lunch.
11 a.m.
Oh wow, yeah, you
Yeah.
are a true Suns fan because you always are watching the games, no matter what time it is in there in Malaysia. You are always tuned in and supporting the Suns. You are Malaysia's biggest Suns fan. So how you feeling
All
about this
day.
series and what are you looking at in Game 4?
Game 4 up a question. So I'm thinking, um, this is the question. So Book, I think, Book has to move the ball more. Like he has to move the rock a lot more than he does because when he goes cold, he has to recognize that he has like role players around him that can actually make shots. So I don't particularly like his hero ball. I get really irritated when he plays hero ball. Like that's the part of his game that I don't like. Hero ball
No,
Book. It
yes,
has to go.
that's a great observation, and that's a challenge when you see him go 3 for 14 from the field like he did in Game 3. A lot of that was on double teams, and he goes into kind of that Booker ball mentality where it's like him versus the world. He wants the Kobe moment, and he's got fantastic players around him, and he needs to utilize those resources, right, Matthew?
Yeah, in the first quarter when he took those threes away from DeAndre Ayton, where Ayton just was sitting there like he could do whatever he wanted, especially when Giannis was out in the first quarter. Um, that was just an issue. And I think what Book was trying to do was just put them away in a way to where he, like in the Lakers game, game 6, where he came out, hit those threes in the first quarter, just kind of really just shut that crowd up, just got down to business and tried to blow this team out. I think that's what he was trying to do in the first. And I think that just kind of hurt him down the line. And the defense was just so intense around him that I just think this team it was just blurred vision the whole game trying to figure out how to pass the ball around. And that was really Booker's story, I think.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
100%.
these are in-game adjustments that he should make himself. Like if you shoot poorly in the first half or the first quarter, probably start the second quarter or second half, move the rock, get the team involved, and probably get a rhythm back by passing the ball or just moving, basically doing anything but shooting to try to get a sense of rhythm in other areas of the game. Because he's more than a scorer now. He can pass, he can rebound, he can defend. Questionable
Hmm.
defense. Questionable defense.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah, and again, I think that we don't know what was being said between Monty Williams and Devin Booker kind of the entire fourth quarter when they're sitting there next to each other. But I'm hoping that kind of, to your point, Nick, that's what he was saying was like, hey, man, look at what's going on out there. See the defensive pressure that's happening. Like if you move the ball around and you get somebody else open, guess what? The defensive pressure is going to start to come off of you because your teammates are more engaged, and therefore the defense has to shift to those engaged teammates instead of him constantly doing what he's doing. And maybe you can come behind on the weak side and get a rebound if they happen to miss, and you get easy points that way. And I mean, there's a lot of different ways that he can score and can affect a game. And you're right, Matthew. It did feel like he was trying to go for the dagger early, especially coming off a solid game 3 where he was hitting a ton of threes, and it just didn't work out. And then ultimately he took himself out of the game because he was too reliant on just his offense. So, but Nick, we really appreciate you always being a supporter of the podcast. Thanks for coming on. It's great to finally hear from you instead of just seeing your name in the chat, giving your observations. And I love that, you're Mikal Bridges' #1 fan. So
Oh yeah.
keep supporting him, man.
Yep.
Awesome.
All right.
Appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
No,
man.
no.
Thank you.
And then we've got a question in the chat from Matt Maravich, and he says, "Are you guys confident we're winning the championship? To me, the Suns are the best team in the NBA. Period." Matthew, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, I agree. I think the Suns are the best team. But if they win, it doesn't matter. They're gonna win, and if it takes 7 games, they're still gonna win. So I think it's funny how us Suns fans are really planning Game 5. Saturday night. Let's win it then. Everyone will be downtown, just crazy. And it might not happen Saturday. It might happen the next 2 games after that, but it's gonna happen. The Suns will win this series, and I've never doubted it. It's tough to go on the pod after a loss, but I really believe in this team to win it.
Yeah, and I think you fight so hard for home court advantage all year long, and this is why. So when you're in the NBA Finals, you see how we perform at home. We kick ass. So if this goes to 7 games, the Suns are going to win. I absolutely believe that. We have Joe from Charlotte who wants to chime in. Joe, how you doing this evening, my friend? Are you really from
So,
Charlotte? Got to press the unmute button.
yeah, mutes right away.
Hi, I'm sorry. Can
No,
you hear
you're
me?
good. Are you really from Charlotte?
I am, yeah. I used to call into John Bloom's post game show like religiously back during the Nash era, and then um, not as much during the bad times, but I still watched. It was just hard to stay up as late as it is on the East Coast. Um, I just wanted to like right now I'm driving to Milwaukee for Game 4, so I'm
Yes.
still that
Oh,
drive. So
right on, man.
about 558 miles to go. Um,
Jeez.
Yeah, so I didn't really have anything to like. You guys are great in terms of just like what you guys say and talk about. You're venting for me, and I've always appreciated that. Um, I guess I heard Eddie Johnson earlier today suggest maybe having Carter come in for Payne if Payne can't figure things out. Any thoughts on that?
So Matthew, you want to take that one? Seen Javon Carter, who we haven't seen
Oh,
in a
well,
while?
we've always wanted Javon Carter to come back. Like anytime he's in the game, there's never been a time even during the season it's like, oh, Javon's in, like get him out. Like defensively, he's gonna be there. I mean, sometimes he'll go through the games and just be kind of cold from three, but he brings so much, and I just want to see him in a finals game. I want to see how vicious he can get. But Payne, I mean, he's not gonna be so consistent like a starter, like a Chris Paul, of course. But I love Payne in the game too. But if you bring in Carter, I'm totally down for that.
I can't tell you how many articles I've written for BrightSideOfTheSun.com about
Yes.
how we need to have Javon Carter in. Like, I feel like after every series, when we have any hiccups, I'm like, just bring in Javon because I'm a huge believer in defensive intensity. He's a guy who shoots the 3 ball. He's not going to be out there in situations in where he's going to be asked to produce or facilitate the offense. If Javon Carter's out there, Booker's out there, or Chris Paul's out there. But what you do have is you have somebody who has the capacity to lock down and make the other team work. And you look at how Milwaukee operated in their space defensively in Game 4, and that's what they did. They kept trying to, or I'm sorry, in Game 3, they kept trying to just tire out Chris Paul and tire out Booker and play that constant and consistent defense. Throw C4 in there. Let him go boom. Boom goes the dynamite. I really think that, if that's what Eddie was saying, I support that. I feel like the Suns Jam Session podcast is a pro Javon Carter podcast. We always have
Yes.
been. Not to take anything away from campaign, but I mean, ever since he sprained his ankle, he hasn't been playing well offensively, and that's where his strength is on the offensive, his ability to be quick and get to the rim, and he just doesn't, he's a step slow, and that step is what makes him effective.
Absolutely,
Cool.
man. Bring him in.
Awesome. Well, Joe, we appreciate it. Drive safe, represent for the Phoenix Suns. You were calling this in the 7 seconds. You were like Flex from Jersey before Flex from Jersey was Flex from Jersey. So
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
awesome. No, we really, really appreciate you supporting the
Fun for me.
podcast. Matt has one other question. He goes, next question, what is Cam Johnson's ceiling? Man, his game is so sexy. Matthew?
You know what's fun with these players we have is you really don't know. I mean, even when you talk about Mikal Bridges, you don't know his ceiling. Cam Johnson, it's like what these playoffs, it's like what the hell is he and where has he been? You know what I mean? Of course, he got hurt the wrist injury, but I don't know. I have no idea. It's gonna be fun to watch him next year so much because he's the guy that we're gonna be watching a lot every game.
I'll tell you, I'm not going to do the player comparison thing because I just feel like it does an injustice to our expectations or to the player you're comparing him to. Like I was having a
Yeah.
conversation with somebody today, and they're like, "Oh, Devin Booker, the next Kobe." And again, this is a casual fan who was upset that we can't say Suns in 4 anymore. I'm like, no, he's not the next Kobe. He's the first Devin Booker. But I'll tell you how I see Cam Johnson. His career, he will always be a valuable player, and he will have a chance, if it isn't with this team, with other teams down the line later in his career, to always have a shot on a playoff team. Like he will be the guy 5 years from now, if he's not with the Suns, that will be a trade deadline acquisition that's going to help a team in the playoffs because of the way that he plays. He's a deadly shooter. He's got the physicality to where he can hold his own on defense. And currently, seeing as he's a little bit younger right now, as compared to my future 5 years in advance prediction, is he's got the foot speed right now. And I think that that's what's really taken a lot of people by surprise is how quick he is. And you can see him starting to really gain confidence in his decision making. Like pump fake, go. Instead of pump fake, wait, should I? No, pass. It's pump fake and go to the rim or ball, shoot. And the more confidence he gains, the more valuable of an asset he's going to be moving forward. I just hope it continues to be with the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, me too. And honestly, he's a guy too where you can't really game plan for him if you're a defense because you don't know what he's going to bring the next game because he keeps showing new things. So it's difficult for them. So that's
Yeah,
what makes it so surprising.
yep, 100%. So again, Matthew Lissy, president of the Cameron Johnson fan club. Matthew, any final thoughts before we get out of here tonight? What is your prediction for Game 4 and where you're watching it?
I think they're gonna win, and even if they don't, it'll still be okay. Because, like I said, even if it's not in 5 games, the Suns will win this series, and you can't count out the Bucks. You just can't. So, I'm gonna say Suns win, but if they don't, then it's fine. But I have to cover and write the game, so I'll probably
Oh
just
yeah,
be
that's right.
sitting behind my desk writing as I watch, and
Yeah, I had
hopefully
Game
not saying a lot of
3.
f bombs.
I had Game 3 for Brightside, and one of the things that I did is, as I say in the article, I'm like, listen, I'm going to approach this game in the most unbiased way and not talk about the referees because I led with the whole Scott Foster thing. And I go, okay, that's the last I'm talking about the referees. And for the entire remainder of the game, I did not talk about any of the refereeing because I feel like the last game that I covered, which was Game 6, the clincher in the Western Conference Finals, if you go back and you read that, it's just an article of me trashing the refs the entire time and just hating on Patrick Beverly, and then just like, good, Patrick Beverly's, we broke him, he's an asshole. And I kind of,
Yeah,
I went back and I read it a few days later. I'm like, man, all I did was bitch about the refs the entire time. So that was my goal. So I'm just,
that's
from writer to writer, I'm just saying avoid that because it makes for a better read.
Yeah, well, we'll see. You know me though. I don't ever fall into that whole officiating thing, except for Aiton getting those fouls early. So
Yeah,
I'll
that's what
stick
was
with it.
interesting. Like we were doing the pod, and all of a sudden, like you were calling bullshit fouls. I'm like, Matthew Paul Lissy, is
Because
that
they
you?
were, they were.
Because they
I'll
were.
say.
They're bullshit when Matthew calls them. As I look at Game 4, I'm going to say I'm going to mirror a lot of what I thought going into Game 3, and how important that first half is going to be. I really think that it's going to be an interesting start for this team and how they're going to make those adjustments and execute those adjustments. And I think the most important thing is how they close quarters, because after seeing what they did in the second quarter, where they gave up a 2-0 run, I'm sorry, 10-0 run, and then in the end of the third quarter they gave up a 16-0 run. That's 26-0 runs to end quarters. That's got to be better. That's got to be better. And as long as the Suns are doing that, they're in the game. And then the goal of this game in Game 4 should be get to crunch time and be up 5 or down 5. Now, if you're blowing them out, obviously that's like the creme de la creme, best case scenario. But you have to be within 5 points. You got to give Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton clutch minute opportunities, because on the other side of the ball, they can't execute in those clutch minutes nearly as well as Phoenix. If you are in clutch minutes and Giannis has to go to the line, that's when those free throws really get difficult for a big guy. That's where he can get in his own mind and he might miss a few of them. That's where you can use that strategy against him. It doesn't do you any good to hack in Giannis when you're down 14 and he's trying to pad a lead. Hack him when you're up 3 and see how he performs. And it would be nice for the Suns to blow them out, but I'm expecting a close game. We haven't really seen a close game in this finals yet. And I really feel like now that these teams have felt each other out for 3 games, the adjustments are going to be happening on both sides. They can call out each other's plays defensively. You're going to see a lot of tight possessions, and it's going to come down to execution. And typically when that happens, you start to see closer games. And again, if that's the case, I feel like the Suns win this because they have the advantage in Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, who knows. Just for Matthew, Cam Johnson's going to hit a big 3 with like a minute left to clinch this one. So Suns will go up 3-1. That's what I'm thinking, bruh.
Yeah, I like that. And I love, have Giannis try to do stuff, try to make things happen with the Suns up, because that's when he has a hard time performing. So if you can do that, man, then I think you got a chance.
There you go. Yeah, you and me both, man. NBA Finals, Game 4 happening tomorrow, 6 p.m. Local time in Arizona. And, Joe from Charlotte, you represent all Suns fans going to Milwaukee there. That's fantastic. This is a reminder to everybody who is listening to please subscribe to the podcast on Twitter @SunsJam. You can follow the show on YouTube, Suns Jam Session Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm @DarthVoida. You can follow Matthew on Twitter.
Matthew Lissy.
And it's also a reminder, if you want some really cool Suns gear, go to shopjustsports.com, pick out your Suns gear, and then put in the promo code SunsJam, and you get 15% off. And I'll tell you, I ordered some stuff the other day. I got it like 2 days later. So Just Sports will take care of you. But on that note, everybody will be coming to you live on YouTube directly following Game 4 tomorrow night. Until then, everybody take care. Try not to stress out too much.
Yes, everyone go home and love your family.
Take care, everybody.